So, you got yourself a new gaming display with a high-end refresh rate, and you've now realized that after playing a couple of games that your current graphics card can only achieve a 1440Hz performance in a few titles. Now, you basically need to get a GPU that can render your favorite games in 1440p resolution at a refresh rate of well above 100Hz. Don't worry, we got you back, so stay tuned. To be honest, there was a time when 1080p gaming was basically the norm, and every gamer wanted to play at 1080p because it was basically equal to 4K at that time, and it was their preferred gaming quality because most games were in that resolution. Nowadays, playing games in 1080p has become a thing of the past, with everybody referring to playing games in 1440p and they're having a great time. Though to be able to actually play at 1440p, you're definitely going to be able to have to buy a high-end GPU that can handle all the latest games at that frame rate. So, without further ado, here are the best GPUs for you that you can grab which play at 1440p. Number 1, the Nvidia RTX 3080 Ti. Probably one of the best GPUs for 1440p gaming is the RTX 3080. The RTX 3080 Ti, though, features 12 GB of blazing fast GDDR6X memory, high speeds, and massive power consumption. The ordinary version of the card does come with 10 GB of equally fast GDDR6X RAM and is around 10 to 12% slower than its beefier sibling. In other words, with all of the settings cranked up to max, you should expect a steady 144 FPS or better frame rate. With many ultra settings, the usual AAA power hogs won't reach 144 FPS, although some will even work well below that. But hey, at the very least, you'll be able to play these games at frame rates sustainable greater than 60 FPS with ultra settings. And when it comes to less demanding games, they're not only going to be able to run a lot smoother, but they will probably run on ridiculous frame rates, way above your monitor's maximum refresh rate. We suggest downloading and using the Rivia Turner Statistics Server, or RTSS, as an extreme frame limiter in that scenario. Simply just set the maximum frame rate to a few frames below your maximum refresh rate, and you'll be good to go. Number 2, the AMD RX 6800 XT. The RX 6800 XT is the fastest 1440p 144Hz GPU that you're going to find on the market today. This card is pretty powerful, and it even outperforms the RTX 3080 at 1440p in various rasterization tests. In addition to this, instead of 12 gigs of memory, you'll be getting 16. The memory is slower though, GDDR6 versus GDDR6X on Nvidia cards. However, AMD's Infinity Cache compensates for the bandwidth differential. Nvidia cards, on the other hand, do have two significant advantages. They do have better ray tracing performance, and where DLSS is the second. Yes, AMD did recently list FSR, or Fidelity FX Super Resolution, as the company's response to NVIDIA's DLSS. On the other hand, FSR does not look as fantastic as DLSS, and it works with both NVIDIA and AMD cards. So you would basically be getting the same level of performance regardless of which card you ended up buying. Still, you may be able to use some sort of benefit from it, but that's all up to you. Finally, if you do check the existing and upcoming games that support DLSS and or FSR, you'll see that DLSS has much more developer support. Number 3, AMD RX 6800. The RX 6800 is AMD's third fastest graphics card and is one of the best GPUs for 1440p gaming. The RX 6800 is slightly slower than the RX 6800 XT, around 12%, but regardless, this GPU still provides one of the greatest 1440p high-resolution rates available. Whenever next gens are released, the 16 GB of fast memory will ensure that you'll be able to play all of them. And overall, the card is capable of running any frame rate at triple-digit frame rates, just as long as ray tracing effects are avoided. Ray tracing performance is inferior to that of NVIDIA counterparts, and there is no support for DLSS. However, the card outperforms the RTX 3070 when competing with the most expensive RTX 3070 Ti. Although you won't be able to play the latest AAA titles at 144 frames per second, the vast majority of existing titles will. Even the most demanding AAA games will operate at around 100 frames per second, which would suffice for single-player experiences. Number 4, the Nvidia RTX 3070 Ti. If you're willing to decrease some visual settings to attain 144 FPS in most games, you don't need to acquire one of the fastest GPUs available. The RTX 3070 Ti should be able to handle the tasks, as it's a fast card with an amazing value GPU that plays 144p gaming at high refresh rates. Now, you might not be able to obtain 144 plus high refresh rates, but still, lowering the visuals will get you there regardless. Number 5. The Nvidia RTX 3060 Ti. If we were to look at MSRP, the RTX 3060 Ti is still the best bang for the buck that does 144p high refresh rate gaming. The card is around 15% slower than the RTX 3070, resulting in triple-digit performance in most games with all options enabled. To be able to obtain a high refresh rate experience, the most demanding AAA games are going to have their settings reduced, and alternatively, where possible, enable DLSS. If you want to be able to reach triple-digit performance in some games, such as Control or Cyberpunk 2077, you will have to do both. If DLSS isn't accessible, then you're going to need to play at medium to high settings, or at least settle for 60 frames per second. Of course, as with all of the GPUs that we've seen thus far, any esports game will run flawlessly with this. Number 6, the AMD RX 6700 XT. The performance of the AMD RX 6700 XT is fairly similar to that of the 3060 Ti and 3070 respectively. AMD's GPU does have a larger graphics RAM, 12GB versus 8GB on the RTX 3060 and RTX 3070, and it even runs at 1440p. On the other hand, there is no DLSS support, and ray tracing performance is substantially poorer. Even playing with the worst offenders in terms of system requirements still translates to nearly triple-digit frame rates in AAA titles, with settings cranked down to medium to high settings. This also means that if you're looking for a 60 FPS experience in single-player AAA games, you'll be able to play them at their highest settings. Of course, this does mean that there's going to be no ray tracing, as the RTX will affect or cause performance to plummet below 60 frames per second in games that support it. Older AAA games and multiplayer games should be able to run at 144 frames per second with the highest settings possible. Number 7. The AMD RX 6600 XT. The AMD RX 6600 XT is the company's latest graphics card, and it's around 10% quicker than the RTX 3060. And while you might be thinking that this card should be relocated to the lower end of the graphics card spectrum, it's actually quite fast enough for the minimum requirements for 1440p AAA gaming with a high refresh rate. However, the RX 6600 XT's high refresh rate in AAA gamings is not really promised, as there is a couple of flaws. First and foremost, disregard the maximum settings, as even with most settings set to high, at least when it comes to the most demanding of games, it's basically a waste of time. Just be prepared to decrease most settings to medium if you do want a high refresh rate with AAA experiences. A medium to high setting combination should suffice for 60 FPS in most games, and of course, ray tracing is out of the question. Plus, since this is not a card designed to run games at 1440p with maximum settings, 8GB of GDDR6 memory should be good enough for good gaming experiences in current and upcoming games. Of course, esports games should aim for high frame rates, typically exceeding well over 240 FPS. Number 8. The Nvidia RTX 3060. Overall, the RTX 3060 is slower than the RX 6600 XT, but we do believe that the Nvidia card is the superior option, at least for now. I mean, sure, it is slower, but it does feature DLSS support, allowing for certain games to exceed 100 frames per second with DLSS enabled. Furthermore, using DLSS, some demanding games like Watch Dogs Legion could be played at 60 frames per second with ultra settings. Finally, the RTX 3060 has a monstrous 12GB of RAM, which is more than enough for current and future games. In demanding AAA games with high to medium settings, you should be able to get at least 60 frames per second, and older AAA games with high to max settings, like Shadows of the Tomb Raider, Borderlands 3, or Red Dead Redemption 2, will perform well above 60 frames per second. Overall, it's not bad. I mean, the 3060's main major flaw is the high pricing, but still, the 3060 is the finest high refresh rate 1440p gaming card for those that enjoy multiplayer games if you want the best performance in esports titles. Before we go, we just gotta add that we didn't add the RTX 3090 because obviously it's clearly excessive for 1440p. And for the same reasons, the AMD RX 6900 XT is also not included in the list. Instead, try to look for the RTX 3080 Ti if you want the best performance at this resolution. Anyways, let us know your comments in the section below, and before you leave, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ding that notification bell, and give us a big thumbs up. Until next time, folks, stay safe and stay informed.